Welcome to a special collaboration between Guardian and Thin Brewline Coffee, where we merge our worlds to bring you an exciting new podcast experience.
So today we have Tony and Justin. They're both firefighters and owners of 5 Alarm Training, a fitness program tailored toward first responders. They've teamed up with Guardian as official fitness partner. And Tony and Justin are here to tell us more about the company and a little bit more about themselves. So Tony, how about let's start with you. Give us a little bit of your background and what you're all about.
Sure. So thanks for having me, guys. First of all, my personal background, going back professionally, I would start with my firefighting. I would start with my military service. I served 6 years in the Air Force as a fire dog. Is the title that we use in the military. I did 6 years of that, which immediately following sequentially, I was moved right into civilian firefighting, and I've been there now for about 16 years. So. I'm currently a lieutenant on our city department, and I've always had a passion for fitness prior to my service. I was working out. I was an athlete in high school. I was working out and training before I joined the military. It was a big part of my life. So when I started into the fire service, I knew that would help me, get through fire academies and just be physically ready for some of the challenges that were going to come up. It was more when I got to the civilian side of the service that I realized that there weren't fitness standards in many places. There wasn't even a standard held by most departments or individuals themselves for keeping themselves fit. And as I got further along into the process and I continued my training and things like that, I realized there was a lot of interest in what I was doing with some of the people around me. So sharing that information was big. The leap to going from training, regular civilian clients and any clients out there and getting focused on the fire service was that, I could share a common language with these guys and girls on the job. And it was one of these things where I was starting to find out that a lot of people just didn't have resources, were a little bit nervous to start, things like that. So as I started giving out the information and realizing that it was working for people, and as far as them being able to digest and process and get through the workouts and understand how I was operating individually and how a firefighter should probably be training physically, that's where 5 Alarm kind of started taking off. I met Justin probably a few years ago. I'm not sure, he probably knows exactly, keeps it maybe on a Google sheet or something. But we met some years ago before Justin got on the fire department. I knew his background. Justin's a fit guy, and we started talking. And then, fast forward a few years, he's on the fire department, and we started talking more about fitness and his background and what I was doing. And we started talking more and more about building something that we could offer to everybody, that was available to everybody at every fitness level, that would just kind of give them a blueprint to be ready to go. And I think that's kind of the gist of who I am and what I believe 5 Alarm is out to do. That's it in a nutshell, really.
What about you, Justin?
Yeah, so thank you guys for having us both on. My background's a little bit different than Tony. Tony has definitely been inside the fire service longer than I have. I'm coming up on 3 years here. Prior to joining, my entire life was fitness beforehand. I was started getting into CrossFit 19, 20 years old. That led me to getting into the competitive aspect of it. The competitive aspect led me to coaching. Coaching led me down the recovery and PT route. And everything kind of switched over when I started coaching full time. And then I also helped open a PT clinic with one of my friends that I competed with. This is back in probably about 2018. So I was working running massage therapy inside of a PT clinic. I was CrossFit coaching full time. Then roughly around 2019, when Dave Lipson and Camille were launching Thunderbro, which kind of at that time was the first company that was really taking hypertrophy and bodybuilding and mixing it with CrossFit. I got involved with those guys pretty early on. So I started off as an intern and then kind of worked my way up, and I was a assistant program manager for Dave. And I did that pretty much until getting in contact with Tony. You know, after I think it was around COVID time, I was coaching full time. I was working with Dave and Camille. We were doing seminars. I was managing all the training programs, and Tony kind of put the bug in my ear about, you know, what are you going to do long term in terms of like a, you know, more of a foundation for a career. And that's when we started, you know, getting all the steps to joining the department. So got on roughly, what was it, 2021, end of 2021, 22. Got on, they sent me off to paramedic school, finished paramedic school, and then they sent me to a fire academy. And now here we are. I would say we you know, when Tony and I first started talking, we already knew that we wanted to do something with fitness together, right? Tony and I went to the same gym. We would see each other kind of in passing a lot of time. Tony knew that I was really into the fitness stuff. I knew that he was into it as well. And it was just kind of a natural thing that we came together and wanted to take both of these, you know, these fields and find a way that we could service first responders and firefighters.
So some people find fitness like after they join the fire service. You're kind of unique in the sense that you already had a lot of coaching experience and involvement in the fitness world. So what are some of like the principles you would do with coaching that have transferred over to now coaching and leading first responders?
Yeah, so I would say kind of meeting people where they are, right? So I you know, I worked with everyone from, you know, mom or dad who just wanted to get a little bit healthier to elite level athletes. And I think everyone kind of comes in at something different. And I think everyone maybe doesn't know exactly where they're going to. And I think it's the job as the coach to meet them where they're at, help to guide them, give them the steps and the tools to figure out where they're going and how to get there. So I think that's something. I mean, I was coaching, almost 8-9 years prior to getting onto the fire department. Like I said, I got on later on, where I had a whole career and a whole other life essentially before the fire service. So for me, coming into this world, I think that definitely helped, because everyone, when they're looking to start their fitness journey, comes in at a different point. And I think it's the job of the coach to meet them where they are and then help them, give them the steps to where they can go.
Meeting them where they are, especially like in the fire service, is important because, like you said, everybody has different backgrounds, different knowledge bases. So, you know, when you're talking with somebody that has experience previously, sometimes it's bad habits, sometimes it's good habits. How do you break that? And then on the flip side, someone with absolutely no experience, they don't even know what like a proper squat is. How do you balance those two very different individuals when you're designing these programs?
Yeah, so I think it's about building trust, right? I think people want to, you wear your brand, right? It doesn't matter if I have a doctorate, a PhD, anything like that, they're going to copy how Tony and I present ourselves, meaning that if we're moving with good technique, we're moving through full ranges, we're practicing. One of the things that we talk a lot about is practicing what we preach. We believe in taking an approach that we blend hypertrophy, strength, high intensity functional movements. And I think the first thing it starts with is building that trust and practicing what you preach. So after you can kind of do that, then you figure out, okay, where is this person struggling? You gave the example, okay, this person might not even know what a squat is. That's fine. That's where we're going to start. And all we're going to do is build that baseline of simple movement patterns. Then if you have someone who's maybe a little bit more advanced, and I don't really like to ever think that people have bad habits. I think people have habits that maybe might not go hand in hand for their goals. Like, let's say someone has, I don't know, I'm the person's like, listen, I've been training and I do X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z has been working for me for years, but I also want A, B, and C. Me as the coach, once I've kind of built that trust, I say, hey, listen, I'm here to help you get to that A, B, and C. Not to say that we're going to get rid of the other things that we're doing, but let's find a way to take maybe some of the things that you do currently have and kind of incorporate that into where we're going to be going to attain your goals.
And Tony, I know you've been in even longer than me in the fire service, so you've probably seen several injuries over the years. And obviously with firefighters, police officers, they can go from this kind of resting state or sitting in a patrol car for hours or being in a deep sleep to jolting up and having to either be in a fight for their life or trying to save someone else's. And there's no warm up period, no stretching. So over the years, what have you seen with that working in the fire service, and what are y'all doing? Like, what's the solution to that? Because I was looking up some numbers before this. Out of 1.2 million firefighters in the U.S., something like 63,000 of them had injuries reported. There were 63,000 injuries reported. So it's obviously a big problem. And yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that and what you've seen over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we work a job that's obviously, we're susceptible to injury, and they happen frequently. We have people injured out all the time. So I think from the perspective when it comes to injury, and we're just talking in general here, a lot of this stuff is preventative. I mean, there's injury, there's cardiovascular, there are all the mental health, all of these things, these issues that we deal with in the fire service, whether it's a specific injury or not. I think when you're talking health and fitness, these things need to be in place to put yourself in the right position. It's much like the job itself. You study the tactics, you study your job and the trade, but having your body ready to go in these situations is critical to your long-term sustainability being on the truck. So if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to break down a lot faster. And you see it in the youth coming on. If they stay on the right trend and maintain their health, and they're paying attention to their nutrition, things like that, their injuries are gonna, that's gonna follow them through their career. So it's the same thing when you see guys at the top end of their career, when they're getting toward the ends. If there's been years and years of not paying attention to their nutrition or their training, they're going to be much more susceptible to these injuries. So I like to look at it as you're kind of just, when you're maintaining a level, it's kind of like you're maintaining your vehicle, where you're changing the oil, you're checking all these things, your truck, all these things. So similar to the body, you got to keep, you're never going to be your 20-year-old self when you're at the end of your career and you're 55 or whatever. You're going to feel it. There's no argument in that, but preparing yourself and keeping yourself in firefighting shape is critical to that, in my opinion.
And I don't know if y'all have assigned roles like in your department. Do you have engineers that only are engineers and backseat riders, or is everybody a Swiss Army knife? How is it in your department?
For our department, most people are Swiss Army knife. There are some specific situations where people will get designated as either the driver for that company, or maybe, it depends on the situation. But for the most part, everybody's got to be ready to do every job. And even in my opinion, for every department, even if you're going to be sitting in that front seat driving and pumping the whole thing, you should have to know and be ready to do every job on the fire ground. So yeah, we get the specifics. Justin does everything.
Mainly the medicals.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, like, if you're an engineer, you shouldn't just do tank to pump pulls as your only workout, right?
100%. And that's exactly it. You never know what you're going to be called on when you're on the fire scene. Just like fire scene, any emergency services, you're going to work every day with that, the expectation of it being what you hope it to be. But that engineer could be trying to get somebody out of a building in short time, depending on the size of your department.
Justin, Tony, tell us about the client experience within 5 Alarm. So help me understand what kind of relationship that you strive to develop. I know that you refer to clients as athletes. So give me more insight about what it's like to be a 5 Alarm athlete.
Yeah, so Jordan, you and I talked a little bit about my background with CrossFit and everything like that, and that was one thing that, well, there's some things in the CrossFit methodology that really don't ring true for me much. One thing that I do agree with is that everyone's an athlete, whether they know it or not, right? And especially inside this field, you need to be able to move athletically. Mm-hmm. So in terms of having someone be an athlete, I treat everyone the same way, whether you're a D1 athlete or the person who doesn't know how to squat, right? Inside my brain, you're an athlete. When someone joins the program, the first thing that they get is a message from me, and it is a custom message of like, hey, what's up? Welcome to the team, right? I try to, that is definitely my area. So we run everything through the Train Heroic app. And the first thing that I like to do is just kind of learn what brought people here, right? What brought the person and what are they looking for? Are they looking for just some HIIT workouts? Are they looking to, do they have a specific goal? What are they trying to do? So that's the first thing that they do. And the one thing that, Tony and I talk about is I try to shoot a message out to these people weekly, right? That is something that I think does make us a little bit unique, is that we try to, like, I can tell you, we just got a new person. They're from Miami Fire, right? Like another guy who's expecting a baby, and we're tailoring up some of his training because, he's about to be a dad soon. So things aren't going to be, he's not going to be able to hit the 5 days a week the same ways. And I have another person who's like, listen, I'm about to hit the academy in 3 months. So we maybe tailor some of the training for him. We take out a little bit of the hypertrophy and strength, maybe add in a little bit more of the cardiovascular endurance pieces. And I think that's one thing that kind of makes us unique, is like, listen, we're inside the trenches with you, right? The workouts that these guys are seeing are the same ones that me and Tony are doing inside the station. The strength programs that we're doing, that are the same exact ones that Tony and I will do, usually 2 to 3 months in advance. And I think that's one thing, not to go on too much of a rant about it, but when people are looking to buy a program, 99% of the time they saw you on social media, right? They either know you or they saw you on social media, and they're looking at you and the things that you're doing, and they're saying, hey, I want that. So one thing that Tony and I are pretty adamant about is that if we're not doing what these people are expecting, we're kind of selling them something that we're not really behind. So I think that's one thing that kind of makes our program unique, is that, like, listen, if you're doing that workout, Tony and I have done it. Like, and that's one thing that we try to film too. We literally film ourselves doing these workouts. We're like, hey, you guys are going to see this in like 2 months. And like round 6 is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Right.
So what percentage of your clients have previously enrolled in another fitness program? And that will determine my next question.
So I would say about 50%. Yeah, a majority of them. So one cool thing about the Train Heroic app is we have 2 different marketplaces. So we obviously have our direct marketing through Instagram. You can click our links and sign up. But then Train Heroic is a third-party platform that they list out. So like, we're under the tags. If you're looking for a program, you're like, I want something that has bodybuilding, strength, functional fitness, and firefighting. It has a list of different programs, and there's a bunch of them out there. And I think a lot of them are great. Right. I think one thing that Tony and I are pretty adamant about is that one program is not quote unquote better than the other program. Right. We're all in this together. One thing that makes our program unique is, hey, if you like to still do the bicep curls, tricep extensions, you still want to lift the heavy weights, but then you also want to still do the functional fitness stuff. That's what we're about. A lot of firefighter programs are very kind of like our way or the highway, in terms of it's you're a firefighter, not a bodybuilder. And we're saying, listen, we don't discriminate when it comes to fitness. There's utilization for every kind of field inside of it. I don't care if it's resistance bands or 1 rep max bench presses. We take all those different facets and we put it together, because that's really what you're going to be faced with.
So it sounds like you really strive to provide a tailored experience for your clients. So let's kind of and talk more about the culture of fitness within the firefighter community and where it was when you started versus today.
When so I started a lot longer time ago than Justin, so I'll go with this one. When I first started on the fire department, I was the junior man for a significant period of time, which is kind of unique to our department. And everybody older than me had already been there for some time, so I was more in a observation mode for a period, and kind of, I don't want to say kept to myself, but I definitely wasn't running around telling everybody that they should be in shape and that they shouldn't be eating a certain way. So again, watching, observing, I realized that these were much older men at the time, and their lifestyle, the ways that they were going about things, didn't involve fitness. It just didn't. There were weights in the station that never got used. It was an afterthought per se. So that was when I started. As time went on, and newer people started coming on, I think just like with society, things started changing, started becoming a bit more popular. The more people that got involved, the more included the people who weren't would feel when they came in. So there was me, and then there was another guy who came on and started, who was, constantly training and watching his diet and things like that. As we progressed, more and more people started asking questions. We're at a point now where I still think there's a big curiosity, but we're from the Northeast. There's no fitness standards here. New England stands on its own in a lot of ways in the fire service, and one of those ways is we do not acknowledge or will we discuss or anything like that about fitness standards. We're a heavily unionized state, and with something like a standard comes a negotiation, and things like that. So I have noticed that, and some of the contacts that I've made, over the last couple of years, that in different regions of the country, in the South, for instance, they are instituting some fitness standards. So just now, I still think it's in its infancy, because right now we're operating on everybody's personal standard for the most part. There aren't actual standards in place, but I feel like we're inching toward that. Again, I mentioned I was in the military, and when I was in the military, there were standard tests that were gone through each year based on your age, based on a number of factors, and the requirements were different as you got older. So I'd like to see something similar like that in the fire service. I think we're working closer toward that in the fire service. At the end of the day, we aren't able to all hold ourselves to a particular standard or whatever. So if there was a bare minimum, that'd be great. And I think that's where we're working, but we still have a long way to go. We've come a long way since I've been on. I know that much. The fact that people are even talking about it is a great thing. So we're not there yet, but we're on the way, and that's kind of part of why we got involved in doing this. Is we want to be a part of that. We want to be a part to push that forward. And again, like Justin's touched on a number of times, we like to try to make sure it's digestible for everybody, that everybody can get a 5-alarm program, take a look at it, and put it to use, no matter where they're coming from, and their fitness level.
Tony, why do you think some departments are resistant to implementing fitness standards?
Fear. I think it's fear. I think, and again, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I think there is some resistance in the sense that a lot of people worry where they'd stand if there was a fitness standard put in play today. There's a lot of people that question their own fitness without saying it outwardly. So I think when it comes down to the individual firefighter, and you're getting an opinion from a bunch of different members on different departments, I think deep down it's just fear of not knowing, okay, if there's a fitness standard, what am I going to do about it? I don't know anything about training. I don't know anything about my nutrition. I've tried this and I've tried that, and none of these things work, and I still stay the same. I feel the same. So I think there's a lot of that at the firefighter level. As far as the administration level, I don't know how they wouldn't want to argue for a more fit fire service, but it comes into one of the old arguments that I used to hear a lot from older guys when I was starting to be a little more vocal about, training and stuff. And I remember one guy said to me, yeah, well, if they're going to make me be in shape, and this is a guy who was not in shape, if they're going to make me be in shape, then they're going to have to pay me more. And to me, I think that's kind of a cop-out, because they're already paying you, and there's an expectation of our service and that we're able to perform all of our duties and things like that. So I think there's a little bit of that behind it. I think it's some fear when we break it down for the people who would have to go a long way. If you ask Justin or I think we'd both say, yeah, let's do it. When's the test? But again, that's why we're all coming from different places, and that's kind of important to think about.
I think we can all agree that coming from law enforcement and the fire service, we know that there are some stubborn individuals who aren't really prioritizing their health. So how do you guys try to personally motivate someone and incentivize them to choose a healthier lifestyle?
It's about leading by example, right? And the reason I'm going to say that is because coming from somebody who's newer, right? So I walk in to this new world. People don't know me. They know Justin is a fit guy, right? That's kind of they knew that I was friends with Tony, and they were like, okay, here comes another fit nut. And of course, that kind of comes with a stigma behind them. The guy that's coming in, I got all my glass Tupperware things. I'm eating my meal prep. but and you know, it's funny in the beginning because it's against the grain. But then what starts to happen, and Tony, I'm sure you can agree with this too, is you're alone inside the kitchen and a person comes in and they start asking you some questions like, hey, what's better, the rice or sweet potato? And that starts to kind of, which showed me early on that they do want this. I don't think there's anyone who's sitting inside this job that goes, I want to be unhealthy. Like, I don't think that's the conversation. What I do think the conversation is, kind of like to Tony's point, is I don't know where to start. So I think that is the biggest thing. The biggest hurdle is you don't know where to start. That we live inside of a world of information now. There is so much between AI, ChatGPT, YouTube, Instagram, right? You say, what is fitness? And you're going to get 15 different responses because there's no objective piece that says like the fit firefighter is A, B, C, or D. So you got one person who's doing yoga classes, one person's doing CrossFit, the bodybuilder, power lifter, and they're all maybe, and you're like, where do I start? I don't want to be X, I don't want to be Y, I don't want to be Z. I just want to be healthy. So I think the biggest piece is people don't really know where to begin.
Yeah, and I think leading by example is always the way, is always the answer. It's what we do on our professional side, as far as again, when we're training, things like that. It's important to show them the way, be accessible. That's how I operate at work as a supervisor. That's how I want people to view me in life. And when it comes to this fitness stuff, like I want to be accessible. I don't want to make it weird. I want to make it normal. I want to have the conversations when you want to have them. And like Justin said, and we were talking about earlier, that stigma, that fear. No one wants to ask what's better, rice or sweet potato, in front of a bunch of people. They want to ask privately because they think it's a bad question, which is one of the huge reasons why we're doing this whole thing, is because this stuff it's not a secret. It doesn't need to be talked about in the dark alley behind the building somewhere. Like, this is like stuff that's going to progress your career, progress your life, your quality of life in general is going to be better. So and leading by example. Justin mentioned the glass containers and bringing your meals in, and that's something that Justin's done it for years. I've done it for years and years, bringing my stuff in. And there are times where you're going to get ribbed for doing that, the low key, the remarks, but just staying consistent and showing up every day. If you're able to perform your duties and your job at a high level, and you're keeping yourself in shape, that's hard to argue with. So when people are seeing you out there, and you mentioned earlier about springing up from bed in the middle of the night to go on a call, when you're down there sitting and waiting for them while they're dusting themselves off, that's part of that, and that's where leading by example comes in. So
Sure. What both of your answers would be for this. How do you kind of break down the barrier between the really rigid individuals, like the people that are sitting around saying, "Oh, you can't sprain fat," and working out, people get hurt doing exercise, and see, that's why I don't do it. How do you attack that? Because just like training on the job, we know it's contagious, and I know with fitness it's kind of the same. So what's y'all's approach with those really rigid guys?
I can
Do you just take off your shirt?
No. Tony might.
that actually
get the worst
effect. That might get the worst effect.
So coming from more of the PT side, right? And so I used to see, before I even got on the fire department, I saw a lot of these guys come into the exact clinic that I was working at. And here's one thing that I do want to kind of make a point, is that orthopedic injury does not discriminate. All right. I've been training 9 years, was a competitive athlete, hurt my back a few months back, right? Was out for a few weeks, hurt my back. The big thing that we're trying to do with fitness is just increase the likelihood that when something does happen, A, it's not going to be as bad. B, it's not going to be as long, right? And C, you have the tools and the knowledge to recover from it. So someone who comes to me and they say, I can't squat anymore because my knees hurt. Me coming from the PT background goes, okay, so you can't squat. Why? Like, do you not think that at some time you're gonna have a grandkid and you're gonna need to squat down to help pick them up, right? Are you done squatting up and off the toilet? Because if you found another way, please tell me about it. So I think what I try to, when someone kind of gives me the orthopedic injuries, what they're actually doing is they're actually asking for help. And so if I have a person, they're overweight and they're like, listen, buddy, when I was in my 20s, early 30s, I used to hit the bench press, everything like that. Now I can't lift my arms up over my head. What they're actually saying to me is like, I miss that. I miss being able to move. So my job as a coach is to kind of, again, meet them where they're at. So you can't move your arms up over your head. What's going on? Where does that hurt? What movements can we do? You don't think that, you don't ever want to put the star on the top of the tree again on Christmas? Like, I think a lot of the time when people give those, I'll call it as excuses, they're actually secretly calls for help.
So there's a little bit of psychology behind, some of the strategy, it sounds like, Justin.
A little bit. Yeah, I won't admit to that. But yeah, I think it's really meeting people. Like I said in the beginning, I know I kind of keep going around with this, but it's meeting people where they're at. Again, one thing that kind of blows my mind is you go through this fitness standard to get on the job. And I know some departments kind of have that. But don't you think that when you get on the job, you have to hit one fitness standard? Don't you think that, 10 years later, we should at least have some segment, not saying a standard, but some segment of whatever caused us to say this is so important in the beginning. Why did that go away? Right? And if the reason is because we don't maybe have the tools or the education or the funding, whatever it is, if that was so important in the beginning, why is that not so important towards the middle? And why is that not really as important towards the end?
Talked about this a little bit. So meeting people where they are, that's the name of the game. And that's obviously what y'all do at 5-Alarm Training. So we know that some departments have different levels of funding or different fitness equipment based off of station age, size, availability of equipment, all that. So let's use the example of a department with little to no fitness equipment. How do you leverage that into not allowing it to be an excuse and giving them all of these different options that they can do instead of just being like, oh, we don't have the funding. We don't have a barbell out here, a squat rack.
We came up with a program exactly for that. We just launched it this past month. It's called the 5-Alarm Limited Program. All you need is a dumbbell or a weighted object and your body weight. Because that was one thing that we found that we had enough athletes that were like, dude, I don't have the time to hit the gym. Right. My kids got soccer practice, then another one has gymnastics. And, I get maybe 30 minutes on shift, if that. And then the other times, maybe I got a dumbbell. And for someone, like I said, for myself, I went, okay, if that's what we got, then let's come up with something for that. So we actually have something designed exactly for that. It's our 5-Alarm Limited Training Program. It's 3 days a week. A majority of people are able to work out on shift. That takes 2 of those days right there. All the workouts take really no longer than 45 minutes. That's from start to finish. And then realistically, you got one other day that you got to get something in. And that's enough to really keep a good baseline level of fitness.
Now I see on your socials working out basically in your on-duty uniform. Is that done intentionally? Is it something you'll actually do, or are you like on a certain piece of apparatus when you're doing that? Because I know it's harder to work out on the medic in some cases than a fire apparatus. So is that something y'all actually do? Is working out in your regular gear?
As someone who rides the ambulance a good amount, I can tell you how I go about it. And this is kind of something that maybe is a little bit newer, Tony. On the department is I actually go to, so everyone on my group knows, listen, 9 out of 10 chance I'm going to be on the ambulance. That's cool. I newer on the department, just got my medic. That's the way it is. So what I did, and maybe for viewers, for anyone, is I went to a few guys and I'm like, listen, dude, I don't care what you need. All I ask is that if we can, give me 1 hour, and inside that 1 hour, I'm going to work out and I'm going to shower and just get some quick food in. And then if you can just cover me for that hour, anything you need, but I got you. And what that kind of started to do inside the group is it started to create a little bit of a culture where like, hey, help out your brothers, help out your sisters, right? This is 1 hour. And I'll say this, I've been doing that now for the past 3-4 months. Maybe one person hopped on, 1 or 2 people had to hop on a single call for me. But on the other end, the second I'm on the ambulance, or I'm sorry, second I'm off the ambulance, I'm on the pump or I'm working desk or anything like that, I return the favor. So, and that was one thing that I kind of realized. I was like, I'm not gonna have engine shifts all the time, right? But it's 1 hour in 24 hours. It's 1 hour to increase something that is going to make me better at this job and potentially could help other people on the job. So that's how I handle it on the ambulance route.
Right. I'm on a truck usually, so I don't have to deal with the ambulance schedule, and obviously, and medicals are a heavy part of our call volume. So my schedule a little different. I usually am able to carve out time. Generally, as far as like the working outs and what we're wearing, it's kind of, I don't know. You probably know, Brandon, the day has a flow to it. And there are some days you're better off not changing out of your uniform, because as soon as you do, the second you're out of it, you're going to have to put it right back on and go out. So if you see workouts that we've done in our Class Bs, our station uniform, or our station uniforms, I should say, that's getting it in. Like there's one post I know that we're doing some push in our uniforms at work. We just decided to get it in, and that it was kind of toward the end of a day tour, and we needed to get that in. So it's more, Justin has a nice system. I kind of use a similar system. Justin is much busier than I am, but I kind of will target out a portion of the day, be ready for it, have everything kind of set up if there's going to be equipment involved or anything like that. But generally speaking, I like training in my gear when I'm doing these station workouts. So for me, there usually isn't much of a change out of clothes. I kind of just keep going with what I have on.
And I'll kind of piggyback on that piece a little bit, because this is something that we've kind of heard of. Social media is, I think, an incredible tool to reach each other, to spread information. But I think one thing that you'll see is there's a lot of judgment that comes hand in hand with that. And Tony talked about, majority of the time, if you can, full turnout gears, that's the words. I'll say for myself, that's not always the case, right? And I've gotten a lot of comments and stuff about just maybe throwing on my pants, or maybe just having an SCBA. And it's like, well, how are you going to call this functional fitness for the job if you're not if you're not fully donned out? And I would just like to say this, is that some movement is better than no movement. And I think we can all agree on that. And I think that it comes inside tiers as well. You're not going to be able to completely don on full gear and get a workout. That's just not this, especially if you're a medic or something, that's just not the name of the game, right? Like we were saying, sometimes depending on the day, that you're working with what you can. But I think also too, that can be a tool. I'm not going to be able to utilize the most efficient way to maybe control my breathing if I'm fully donned in all of my gear, but I can just wear my SCBA for a workout, go on air, and focus on some breathing. And that can be enough. So I think, too, I think getting rid of that judgment piece, that it's an all or nothing game, is really something that we kind of strive for. I mean, obviously, we fully agree. The majority of those workouts, when I can, I'm inside full gear. But sometimes it's just a pair of pants. Sometimes it's just on air. But sometimes it's nothing at all. But I think getting rid of that stigma of it's this way or the highway, that's not the way movement works, right? And that's not the way training is. Competing is different. You're competing when you get the call, right? You're training when you're at the station, you're moving, you're doing these workouts, and you're having some kind of facet of something that goes hand in hand with the fire service. That's training. The job, that's competing. Yeah, so for something like that, if I have a person, and let's say the workout squats, and I think, and that's one thing that we do include inside of our programming is scaling options, and I think that's one important piece, right? Is if someone's like, hey, I'm just gonna, their squats, I'm just gonna do the best that I can. I think that normally if someone's inside that degree, they're probably working with myself or Tony. I mean, we've had people kind of come up to us and be like, hey, listen, I want to do a workout with you, but I got X, Y, and Z injury. So I think that's our job as the coach. One cool feature that we do have inside the app is the direct messaging feed. And that's something that I'm checking all throughout the day. So someone can shoot me a message and be like, hey, I see this workout is on Tuesday. I struggle with any kind of movement overhead. Is there a scaling option that you can send me?
Tony, do you have any insight or perspective on like attacking functional fitness in different ways when you're coaching someone? Because I imagine y'all do some coaching around the station too. It's not all on an app. So I know some people might be in different states, but you're coaching and leading the guys you work with.
Right. And there's so oftentimes, like Justin touched on it quickly, you know, if you and you mentioned squats, but if we're talking to them about functional sides, if they're, you know, not able to deploy a Matty Dale or an attack line, if they can't get that off, it's heavy for them on their shoulders, something like that, you know, getting them to do that particular task might be the top end of where they're not there yet. So they want to be able to do that more efficiently. So we're going to look for different things, and something like a squatting, shoulder press, different types of movements depending on the tactic or the skill they're looking for is something that we really try. Justin really tries to make sure that we may not be mimicking the exact movements that's one thing he was touching on, is people will jump on these workouts and look right at them specifically and say, well, you know, that's not how you should be dragging a dummy out of a fire, or, you know, something very technical, something like that. But at the end of the day, Justin mentioned the same line earlier, some movement is better than no movement. And this goes a step above that, is if you're improving physically, there's no way that your improvement isn't going to bleed into your other aspects of the job. So though we may be able to tailor some of the very specific things like pulls and hose drags, dummy drags, things like that, there are other skills that are just going to naturally come and develop and improve over time when you're going through these programs. And when you're, you know, say doing a squat, people don't see the correlation all the time, but these things do translate into our job on a regular basis. So sometimes it's a matter of just showing people how things do translate, because a lot of people would be scared of a squat, like you gave for an example, and we would be able to explain to them why it's beneficial, why it's important, and how they can go about doing it in a way that's not going to, you know, hurt them and correct them in that sense. So I think, again, we always keep getting back to that, meeting them where they're at, understanding where their trouble spots are, understanding the pain point, and coming up a solution that works specifically for that person or for the task we're trying to complete.
Functional fitness. Functional is such a buzzword in the
Yeah,
fitness
terrible.
industry, right?
Terrible.
It's like you got your Bo Soup Ball people, you got CrossFit, you got F45, and everyone's saying functional, functional, functional. And I think the biggest thing is what makes a functional movement. It's just something that you're going to do. All movements are functional movements. I'm just going to kind of call it that. Now, you do have different classifications. Like, is a bicep curl functional movement? I don't know. Can you hold an object at 90 degrees? Can you lift it up 90 from fully extended to 90 degrees? Does that make it functional? Sure. For us, I mean, CrossFit has their definition, and I agree with a lot of it. We gave a drill for our department, talked about the 10 general physical skills. Totally cool, totally awesome. Went down all of those pieces. But let's face it, the functional movement is movement. Functional training is training. Okay. Again, I think there's this stigma inside the fitness world that we try to bastardize certain methodologies or certain training ways. But let's face it, at the end of the day, it's movement. All movement is functional. I think that is a big one thing that we really try to hammer home.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also, as y'all know, in the fire service, a lot of things you're doing on scene, especially when you get into overhaul or forcible entry, a lot of these movements are at awkward angles, things that you probably don't train exactly, just because you have to do it. You have to do it based off of the circumstance you're given. So that's a good point. Real quick, I wanted to ask both of you, this is for both of you, what's like your biggest, or let me rephrase that, what's your favorite success story from a client?
I can go first on this one. So dealing with first responders, I mentioned pain points a minute ago, understanding some pain points that I just wasn't familiar with. So I came into the whole scenario thinking, you know, everybody wants to be, you know, fit, ready to go. And, basically what I'm getting at is I didn't always understand how far set back some people were, or how difficult their days really were leading up to coming to work even. So I had a client that was somebody that was looking to lose some weight. And
you're saying you don't have to train the exact movement or the exact task. Like, you can attack it different ways. So how do you do that? So if somebody wants to get better at squatting, I assume you're not going to have them just squat until they can squat, right?
I remember that there was two specific times that this particular client, he was actually a police officer, and one picture that he shared with me one day was just his duty belt, and he was holding it was on his waist, but he was holding it out with his hand so he could stick his other arm through his duty belt. And that was one thing that was really cool, because he had lost so much weight to get to that point. But the bigger thing that was just a real eye opener for me, and it helped me realize that not only was our goal to create healthier and more fit first responders and firefighters, was he mentioned one day that he didn't, and he was excited about it, that he didn't have to catch his breath after tying his boots that morning. He didn't lose his breath while he was bent over trying to tie his boots. And when he said that to me, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because here I am thinking people are trying to get to the level where my mind feels like I'm ready to go. And then I'm understanding that there's battles that I don't know anything about, that are people on their way up trying to get out. That's where that fear comes in. And it's just a fear of maybe failure, not knowing where to go. So that particular client, I'm still friends with him. He's continued his journey, but to see those personal goals, those personal things that made someone's actual life better, not just the job, but his quality of life had improved. Those are the things that I like seeing. That particular client comes to mind, because as much as I want to see a fit responder, I also want people to understand that this also ties in with just being a fit human being, be able to enjoy and experience life in a way that doesn't feel like such a burden.
What's your favorite success story so far?
So what was this, last year, Tony, that we did that drill?
Yeah.
So I had this guy on his way out, right? And so we broke down everything. Our thing was functional fitness for the fire service, and it was a very similar seminar to one that I used to give that I was a part of with Dave and Camille, and that was hypertrophy for functional fitness. And what I really did with that is I took some of those key principles and I carried that over to what we do now on the job. And one of the big things that we did is we broke down a lot of the nutrition. We broke down just general of like, hey, like this is some basic ways that you should be moving. Here's some different exercise and stuff you can do. And the person's now retired, and they reached out to me, and they were saying that they got the kickstart from that drill, from those different pieces, and learning that. And that's what I was saying before about, like, this is very you're hammered on this, and it's so important. You're trying to attack it from all angles because you're trying to get this job, and you know that you got to pass this test. But I think towards the end, you're about to go inside of a whole new test, and that whole new test is what's your quality of life when you retire? Right? What are you doing after all this? You gotta, ideally, the game, correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but it is to have more years off than when you were on. And he really can't. He came up to me afterwards and was like, I really feel like you kind of shined a light on how I can really get the most going into retirement. And I think that for me was awesome. Coming in as a junior guy, having a senior man kind of say like, hey, listen, like, I know you're new, but thank you. I think that was huge for me.
Justin, Tony, I love your passion for fitness, but something that we haven't asked you just yet. Tell us about why you're in love with the fire service, and what you would say to aspiring firefighters out there to try to encourage them into fire service.
You can go first, Justin.
Why you should do it. So, like I said, for me, I feel like I live two different lives, right? I had my life inside the fitness industry, and now I have my life inside the fire service. And if you're looking to do this job, you are going to get some of the hardest days on shift. You are. You're gonna have some of the toughest times. Let's face it. You're gonna go through some trauma. But on the other end of that, I've had now some of my best days. On some of the hardest times that I've had, this community was there for me. Right. On some of the best memories now that I've had recently are the camaraderie with your brothers and sisters. And I think more importantly than that is you get to be inside of a field that it's not about you. And it's not. And you know, there's something, I think for myself, when I was inside the fitness industry, yes, it's about the client. You're trying to promote health and fitness, but let's face it, they're coming for you, right? They want to know, they want the abs or the big shoulders or anything. So it's very me. What am I going to do first, then help you? Where this world is completely different. They don't care. They don't care what I did. Everything building up, they care about that call and what can I do for them during that time, because this is about their emergency. So if you're someone who thrives on service, this is a spot for you, man. Like we ring the doorbell, knock on the door, come on in, because that's where you're gonna be fulfilled.
Yeah, for me, I could go on all day about this. I love the fire service like nothing else in my life. I mean, I hate admitting that. I love it because it speaks to my core values. If Justin mentioned service, I believe very much in service before self, in all aspects of my life, whether it's on duty or off duty. I think we all need to be in that mindset more than we are currently. So service before self. And I'm a big person. I believe strongly in personal integrity. So these two things together to me allow, on a personal level, me to my personal standards to shine. So, you know, as Justin touched on, if you're looking into the fire service, there's something calling you to that. There's something inside that's calling you, and it may be service, and maybe integrity, it may be the camaraderie, but whatever that thing inside you is, everybody's got a why. And whatever that why is inside you for somebody that's coming on or considering this job, I would encourage them to fully embrace whatever that why is, understand it deeply, believe in it, fortify it, live by it, and make sure every day you're reminding yourself of what your personal core values are and what your why is and why you're showing up every day. Because as Justin mentioned, you're going to go and do some pretty, you're going to be in some pretty tough situations. So you have to bring that to the table. And this job is, it takes things away from you that you'd never expect, but it also puts things into your life that you'd never expect. Some of those things include perspective. There's a value in what you're doing. You go to work every day and it might be hard, but there's something that you can say when you're done after a hard day, and that you did it when a lot of other people wouldn't. So to me, it's extremely rewarding on a human level, to do what we do. That this is all, most of what I'm talking about right now is aside from the actual fun firefighting stuff. That's just fun because it's fun. But when it comes to serving the public, there's not, for me, a better feeling than leaving a home of a medical call or leaving a situation that somebody had no idea how they were going to handle it, knowing that at least in that moment you satisfied their anxiety, their fear, whatever that was, and keeping it on a personal level. So for me, I enjoy interacting with people, and I always ask people when they walk in the door. I asked Justin before he got hired, why do you want to do this? And to me, it's important that not what your answer is to me, but it's important that you get in touch with why you're doing this and make sure that the reasons aren't just the paycheck or the schedule or something like that, because you're going to get weeded out pretty quickly by a guy like me. You know who loves this job, and you know who's just there to punch a clock. And if you're just going to punch a clock, there's plenty of clocks to punch in other places. But this job involves passion, it involves commitment, and it involves your complete dedication. So to me, bring those things to the table and you won't go wrong.
I love that. I think I want to be a firefighter now. Okay, guys, so it's time for our fishbowl segment. I don't know if you've heard of
Oh,
this, but in this
Oh
fish
boy.
contains a bunch of random questions. And so I'm going to pick one. I don't know what your question's going to be. And then I'll ask you both individually, okay? All right. So if you could have coffee with one person, dead or alive, who would it be? Let's go with you, Tony.
Oh man. So one person, that's a really crazy question. Ooh, yeah, I don't know. I want to say a family member because I feel like that's more valuable to me than anything. Uh, um, yeah, I would go with my grandmother who's not here anymore. That's who I'd have coffee with. But famous person, yeah, I don't know. I'd want to talk to anybody. Honestly, it wouldn't be a person. I would talk to anybody who's done this job for over 40 years. I would sit at a table with anybody who's done this job for a period of time that's greater than mine. And I would love to sit down and understand a perspective from that's longer than mine. Because as I get into the point in my career where I've been here a little bit and I'm starting to kind of feel like the old guy a little bit, just because I've seen the older trucks that are no longer there, and you know. Um, I would want to sit down with probably the most, you know, longtime member of my department, and know how our place was prior to me being there, and the people that I knew before me and before that. So I like history. I'm a history buff. I would go back in the fire service as far as I could.
All right, Justin, same question.
Oh man, I knew it was
I
going to be the
mean,
same question. I was
I
really
wish I
hoping it
was
was going to be a
second, to be
different one.
honest. I needed more
Yeah,
time to think
geez.
about that.
You know what, man? I'm not gonna lie. As soon as I was like, I didn't want to go with my great grandfather, and then you said my grandma. I was like, damn it. Like, okay, I can't choose
Whatever.
that
You
one.
got me on a couple things too already, so whatever.
Yeah. Man, is it a cop out if I say like Christ? Like, am I allowed to say?
No, never. How
Like,
is
He's Jesus
yeah,
juking.
I'm like,
Justin's
yeah,
never a
Jesus
cop-out?
juking. Justin is Jesus
yeah.
juking right now.
I was like, man, is that a cop out? Like, I mean, I would resort it back to faith. I mean,
I like it, Justin. I'm busting, man. I like it.
yeah, no, I mean, honestly, that was the first one that came to mind. I was like, well, Christ is the first one
The
that I
OG.
like. I get to choose one being that was on this earth that I can sit down and have a cup of coffee with. Like, I want to know, like, how am I doing? Am I doing all right? Do I got to change up anything? So, I mean, that's I would say is kind of my first one. The next one, so I actually kind of similar to Tony. It's crazy. That family is probably the first one I would say kind of comes to most people. I lived with my great grandfather. My great grandfather passed away at 104. And in my early 20s, I used to late teens, early 20s, I lived with my grandparents, and I got to live with my great grandfather. My great grandfather, like I said, fought in World War II and was a very inspirational person to myself. And I think I learned a lot about a life of service through him. So I guess just to be able to do that again and kind of say like, hey, I'm doing it, would kind of be my number two.
I think those are both great answers. And you can't go wrong because it's your question.
Wrong with Jesus Christ. I mean, come on. Like, it's bulletproof.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah, I was surprised you didn't choose that one. I was like, yes, you did take it.
Well, Justin, Tony, it's been a pleasure speaking with you both today. So we will add your contact information in the comment section for folks that might be interested in taking a closer look into the 5-alarm training services that you guys offer. And we hope that you guys have tremendous success, and we wish you all of the best in the future.
Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate it. Thanks, Brandon. Thank you, Jordan.
Hey, thank you so much for having us. And for anyone who is, looking to learn more about 5-alarm, you can see us. We're on the Train Heroic platform. If you have the app already, so we are inside the marketplace for that. That's the number 5 alarm training. And then also both of us are on Instagram. My user is Justin.5alarm training. And then Tony, I think yours is similar.
Tony Spear 5alarm training. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have our standard 5-alarm training Instagram as well. So if you kind of want to know a little bit more about what we do, how we train, and just everything behind everything that 5-alarm, that's the best spot to find us.